Hi, this is Mandla Gagayi, and this is my story in my own words. I like the element that you talk about us addressing school sport. And the question that's been asked so many times is, whose responsibility in terms of government does it fall under? Does school sports, would you say school sports falls under the Department of Education or the Department of Sports, Recreation and Arts and Culture?
It's Department of Basic Education. Must manage sport at school. It's Department of Basic Education. The Department of Sport must only provide support in terms of equipment, but in terms of the programming, it must be Department of Basic Education. And the biggest problem we've been having currently, last month, the Minister of Sport announces that physical education is going back to schools. He did not have that money. Only a Minister of Basic Education can make a curriculum announcement. Again, it goes to what I was saying, that we like to say sweet nothings on TV so that people think we are doing something. So it is the mandate of basic education. Who stopped boxing at schools? It was not Department of Sport, it was Department of Basic Education. They stopped boxing at schools to prove that it is their mandate to manage sport at school.
So to make that, so then we would be correct in saying that, especially from a developmental aspect, there needs to be a collaboration between the Department of Basic Education, where kids spend close to 8 hours a day, and the Department of Sport, to say there needs to be some sort of collaboration in order to bring back school sports.
Yes, and not only those two departments, social development. Remember, sport is not just about running after a ball or just running. Sport, there must be a holistic approach to sport. Yes, the two departments will manage the program, but social development is to come in to work on the psychology side of sport, and also as well as the nutrition side of sport. You need Department of Transport to come and provide transport for these kids to go back to school or to go to competitions. So there's many departments. You need Department of Justice and Corrections to come and give lessons on the law of sport. Because if you teach kids at that age that doping is illegal, and only the legal fraternity can have that. So you need a holistic government approach to sport in South Africa, then it will flourish.
And I think the way that you're putting it is also essentially what sport is. The sport, we always tend to see it as what we see on TV, but this sport is multifaceted. As you say now, there's the law element of sport, there's the social development element, there's the health element of the sport. So it's really a multi-faceted aspect industry, which is a beautiful industry in that it encompasses a lot of different elements. But I want us to come back into the university sports landscape. And I think anyone who calls themselves an avid sports follower or sports fan will agree with me when we say that university sports plays a critical role in the success of our national team. And, you know, as a person who's been involved in university sports for, I'm going to say it is that whole 30 years, you know, what are some of the challenges that you would say the landscape of university sports has faced or is currently faced with?
So the biggest challenge that university sports face is trying to get the national federations to understand the importance of education. Because there is still that disjuncture between education and sport when it comes to federations. Let me make an example. A UWC men's soccer player, a good player, will be spotted, let's say, by Cape Town City, for example. But as soon as they spot him playing for university, when they sign him, they will say, then you need to choose, because we want you here, training in the morning, afternoon, and evening. So don't tell us about it. You going to school and all that. Now, that kills the education. And the second challenge is with our government and federations, where most of these, if you look at the Olympic team, 80% come from universities. But there is no intentional plan from SASCOC, government and the national federations to say, how do we plow back into these universities to make sure that they keep developing this talent? And now what you find is that university facilities are run down, that most talent gets lost because now there's limits in terms of capacity. But if they were to come and say, okay, UWC, you are good in terms of football, let us make UWC a center in the Western Cape of women's football. SAFA come, SASCO come, government comes, let's sit with UWC and say, what needs to be done to make sure that we have a good center for women's football in the Western Cape? Then you will see how many more players will come out of that system. But currently, we have a relationship where federations are like parasites. They only take from universities, they don't give back, they don't even give bursaries. We give bursaries, but when players are called up, we must release them. When they get injured, they become our responsibility when they come back. So those are challenges in the university sport, and the biggest challenge now has been with the free education. Remember, before the free education, students would pay to play sport because government doesn't give funding directly to sport. They will give a grant to the university for the whole university, and the university then will decide how much you must give to sport. Now with free education, students get funded directly by NSFAS. NSFAS doesn't fund sport. Now, it means now universities are bleeding more money now to subsidize the NSFAS students to still continue to play sport because they cannot pay. Now, you find that the numbers of people playing sport are growing because it's free education, but the money is decreasing because the university grants keep decreasing. Last week we were told that we must reduce our budgets for next year by 4% because the government grant is going to reduce. Sport is not reducing. Now, how do we then balance the needs? Because sport must grow, but also there must be funding to support that growth. So that is the biggest challenge.
And going back to that challenge, how do you look to address that then? Because Nyani, it's something that's there where the participation numbers are going to grow. There'll be more kids coming into the system next year that will want to participate in sport, but essentially you are being told to reduce your budget. How do you then still ensure that your facilities are top-notch, that you are still offering the kids the opportunity to participate in sport?
Well, it means we have to make some unpopular decisions, because the reality is we cannot be everything to everyone. We will need to reprioritize our sporting priorities. Currently, we have 3 categories of sport at UWC. We have high performance, which is 8 codes, and then we have competitive sports, which is about 10, and then we have recreational sports, which is 6. Which means now, when you look at that continuum, more resources go into high performance, and then into competitive. We don't spend much on recreation because by nature it's recreational. So we will just provide the bare minimum that they need. Which means now going forward, we will need even to look into our high performance sports and say, okay, what do we relegate here to still make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve? Then we're going to start looking at performances and priorities. Who is more priority? Who brings more value? Then in terms of that, we'll then say, okay, this one must be a recreational sport, this one must be competitive, which will be unfair on the students. But the reality is we have to do that because it cannot be business as usual when resources are not giving us a business as usual approach.
And when you then say who brings more value, what is your definition or what is your criteria of the word value?
See, if I go and market UWC out there, I will look at which clubs will make my case stronger. And currently, our flagship, the biggest flagship that we have is women's football. And second to women's football is rugby. So those two are the ones that we always use, even when we negotiate a sponsorship, we use those two. But what we do, when we get that sponsorship, we don't get that sponsorship for those two. We use that money to spread across. Like now, if we were to say, okay, women's football gets 1 million in sponsorship from your company, we would say 25% of that 1 million must be spread with other codes. And then 75% must stay with women's football. Because remember, for one sport to grow, it must also support other sports to grow. So that is how we share our little budget from it.
And I like the fact that you mention your flagship sporting codes, which you essentially say you were defining the value, what the term value means, and it's those sporting codes that if you had to go out and market the university sporting department, it's what you take with you, it's what you talk about. And you mention women's football. I think a lot of people, if we then say women's football, UWC, abantu are confused, is it a professional team, is it a university team, because of the strides that the club has made. I'm going to call it a club. The club has made, because it featured it's developed firstly a number of the ladies that won the Women's African Cup of Nations, a number of the ladies that then made the World Cup team, and essentially even the coach is involved within the national setup. And then it then was one of the founding clubs, or the clubs that were part of the Hollywood's Bet Super League, which is now the professional league of South African women's football. When you look at that sporting code, women's football, and you sit back and you analyze it, what would you say makes it so successful?
I think it's the support that we give to them, and also being intentional about our transformation agenda. You know, when I got to UWC in 2015, by 2016 already, we had said, okay, our focus must be on women. Yes, not neglecting men, but we need to focus on women. Because the reason for that, just beyond transformation, was the fact that we were trying to identify our competitive edge. Because we knew that if we want to be good at everything, we're going to fail. But let's look at what will make us unique. And we identified women's football as one of those. And we said, okay, for women's sport at UWC to thrive, then we must make sure that all women's coaches are coached by women. Mm-hmm. Because it is still a bit patronizing when you have a man coaching women. Because there are things that you, as a man, you have limitations on how far you can go. Mm-hmm. So, but when it's women coaching women, you are allowing women to really own their space. And that is what has really allowed us to grow. And we plowed resources there. And we made sure that our recruitment is intentional. We don't just go there and recruit for the sake of recruiting. We recruit talent that we know will come to UWC and add value to the club. And also, when we appoint coaches, it was our intention to say, let us not just get a coach who is not known. Because players naturally are attracted to a coach. Mm-hmm. The first thing a player will ask you when you say come and play for UWC is who's the coach. Whether it's rugby or hockey, they will ask you who's the coach. Once they know that, oh, this coach at least I know, then they will come, because they trust that the fact that that coach is there, it means the seriousness within that coach. So that is how we have evolved with our football. And the networks we have with coaches in different provinces, again, it was deliberate to us to say, no, let's have these relationships with coaches so that when we need players, we get a call from a coach from up north saying, no, there's a good player here, you need to come and have a look at it. And we don't really go out there and recruit. People are recruiting for us because they see that what we are doing here is unique to UWC, and that is what makes UWC what it is.
And it goes back to that advice that you had for young people of networking. The power of networking, that Now, you are not doing the recruiting, but people, your network is doing the recruiting for you. And by simply calling you, making a call to you, or sending a message or a video to say, have a look at this player. And the team has gone on to produce really some of the remarkable players, some truly remarkable players. Abotembi Katlana, or the nickname Umsawao. There's a lot of number of players, and when you truly look at where they come from, they are not always centered from the Western Cape, but it's players from all around. And how do you then balance that, the diversity within the team? Because it's people from everywhere, all around the country. And when they converged onto the university and into the same team, what dynamics do you look to address when those people come into this? Because what you've also said is you are deliberate in the recruiting. You want people that are going to work towards the common goal. Like, how do you then, what is the criteria that you then put out to say, okay, this person might work for us?
When we recruit, we don't start by recruiting talent. We must recruit character because of the history of this university. This university is where it is because of the character of people that work with it. So even when we recruit, there are good players out there that we will never invite to UWC because we know they will not fit into our work ethic. So once the coach has had a look at a player and decide that, okay, no, this one actually will fit into our work ethic, then we invite that player to come over. And when they get here, we have an induction. Players must know where this university comes from, why we are doing what we are doing, why are we being deliberate by supporting women. Once they know that and own it, they become the same ambassadors who will go out there and recruit players. Because now, the nice thing now is, even if the coach doesn't recruit players themselves, they go and recruit. They will come to us and say, there is this player, there is that player. Which means that if a player from UWC can go and recruit, it means that player is happy to be at UWC. Otherwise, they will not go out and recruit knowing that they are unhappy. So that is how we use recruitment. And also, we sell our recruitment through education. Remember, when we recruit you, we don't say come and play, we say come and study. We're going to give you a full scholarship for football. So all the players that play, they studied at UWC and played, because at the end of the day, remember, there's no money in women's football in South Africa. So at least they must play, enjoy it, but they must have a degree that when they leave, they will leave at least and have something that they can fall back on.
And I like that you put emphasis on the study, because when our women's team, the Banyana team, actually won the Women's African Cup of Nations, a conversation that really amazed quite a number of the general population was the number of players that are not only products of university sports, but essentially players having actual degrees. Players, and that is not something that is very prevalent when we compare it to men's football. I think the Amazulu that recently started a program where they're educating their players, and it speaks to the difference in terms of the development of women's football and men's football. Men's football is very much, and this is my own analogy, very much centered around the clubs, which are all situated coincidentally up north in the Gauteng region. But for women's sport, it's more based in the university institutions, and it's very dependent on the university institutions. And I want us, you make mention of history of the university. And when you make mention of the history of the university, I think a lot of people, when you say UWC, a name that will come up is the gentleman Bush and the gentleman that you have hung up on the wall, Mr. Chester Williams. And the reason why I'm bringing him up, I want us to move a little bit into the rugby element and that rugby program. How much of an impact has he had with the rugby program?
Jeez, may his soul rest in peace. Actually, when I got here in 2015, The coach then was Peter de Villiers, and he was in his last 3 months of his contract. So when his contract expired, then I was tasked to go and look for a coach. And like we say, we will always go for high caliber coaches that can at least inspire that hope and confidence in students. So what I did with Chester, I went to Western Province Rugby actually. I met a gentleman there, Hart Small. I told him that you know where UWC comes from, you know our history, and I need a coach that will not rubbish the history of the university, but will appreciate and build on it. And without hesitation, he just said, no, your man is Chester. If you want a coach that you're describing, gave me Chester's number and called Chester, and actually it was my first time ever meeting Chester because I've seen him on TV. So we met and we just had an informal chat, and I said to him, okay, can you please next week prepare a presentation for me on how you will take UWC Rugby from where it is and put it to Varsity Cup. Then he gave me a good presentation, and I think what also worked well for him was that he's also a university graduate. He understands the role of you especially coaching someone within the university system. And from there, we did not only develop as colleagues, we became best friends actually. And he took our rugby really from, I think they had played over 7 years in the Varsity Shield. And his first year Varsity Shield, he told me in advance that, look, I'm not going to win Varsity Shield this year because I'm not coaching my team. I'm coaching a team that I found here at UWC. So I will use this year to go and recruit players that I know will play for me. And we accepted that, and we lost the final against Vets, and that was the year when Vets got promoted. Following year came, we won Varsity Shield, but it was not pro. You remember, it was 2 years promotion. We won Varsity Shield, and then he said, see, this following year we're going to get promoted. And indeed, we got promoted, and he had a long-term plan. You see, that is why I like long-term planning. Chester's plan was that by 2023, UWC must play the Varsity Cup final. It was a plan already there. So it's not surprising that you see O'Kelly Arends, Herschel Yankees, because those are the players that he went out and recruited because he knew the kind of player that he wanted for UWC to win.
Mr. Mandla, on my side, I've just been listening to you speak. I wanted to ask, what's the history of UWC, because you speak quite passionate about it.
No, the history of CCT University, how it came about, you'll remember that in the 50s into 60s, black students were not allowed to go into universities, which were white at that time, universities, Stellenbosch and others. So the apartheid government created this university as a bush university where black students must go and study there so that they can graduate and go and work for white men. So that is the history that is university. That's why you have this name Bush. That name, because this used to be a forest. It was bushes here. So they just said, okay, we're gonna build a black university in those bushes because these ones don't deserve to study at UCT or Stellenbosch. And that is how UWC started. And the apartheid plan at that time was that UWC will produce graduates who will not amount to anything because they are black. Therefore, they must just be given this education that they want, but it's not going to take them anywhere. So, because of that history, it is why every day we always say, let us live to prove that what we told we cannot do. Let us do it, and let us do it better than those who told us that it cannot be done. So that is the history that we will tell our first years when they come. That you come here, this house was destined to be nothing, and we've built it. So it's up to you to prove those that they thought you cannot do it. Do it better than them. That is why now no formal institution can come here and tell me about football, because I beat them every day, anytime. And that was never their plan. Even in rugby, the way we are developing, very soon, they will not come here and tell us about rugby. Because that is why, if you look at our motto, it says Respice, Prospice. It says look back in order to move forward. So when we build, we always look at where we came from. And because of where we know where we came from, we don't want to go back there. So the only way for us is forward. That is the history.
So good. Thank you.
And I think it's befitting that you actually gave us that history of the university before we actually look into the future and what you see coming up. So we're going to Prespice, am I saying it correctly?
Yes.
So we've looked back at the history of the university and essentially your journey within the sports administration of the school. If you are to then look forward, let's say a good 10 years, I'm not sure if you still see yourself here within 10 years, but if you are to look forward into the future of UWC Sports or UWC Sports, what is your vision for UWC Sports?
To produce more national athletes, not just athletes, but who are graduates. So you see, for me, what I always strive for at UWC is not just an athlete who goes out and win a match. At the end of the year, I must be able to say, did this athlete pass the exams? Those who are doing the final year, to the finish. And that's what makes me sleep better at night. Because when you look at the current setup of sport in South Africa, we have a lot of people who were once heroes and now they are down and out. And so that is not the future that I want for a UWC student athlete. So the future that I would like to see at graduation, where we're going to be saying 50% of the graduates this year came from sport. To me, that will mean that we have done something good for the university. But not forgetting that we also provide dual career opportunity for students. Produce graduates as well as the national athletes that will go out there and represent the university the way we want to be represented. I think the best epitome of that currently is Ketley Arendse. When you see him play in the Springboks, we always get emotional because if you can know his story, actually he is the story of UWC. If you will know how he came to UWC, then you will say actually UWC is living its motto.
And you know, you having taught us about the history of the university and where it essentially comes from and what it was developed for, and it exceeding the boundaries put in place for it to become a very successful university, not only in terms of its graduates, but in terms of the performance of the university institution itself. And remembering what we said about the university structures and the role they play in the development of the country and the sport, how do you see the role of UWC sport evolving and in the greater landscape of South African sport?
I think the university in its strategy, it's aspiring to be a global university. And the implication of that for us is that if we get into global space, we will find our teams with more international diversity, which is something that will be good for us. And the downside of that progress, actually, that you have mentioned, we exceeded expectations, and that actually has counted against us in terms of government funding. Because remember, we used to be classified as historically disadvantaged university with the likes of Fort Hare, University of Limpopo, University of Venda, Zululand. Now, because we have exceeded expectations, we are no longer we don't see them as our competitors anymore. We are not in that category. We have moved into the previously advantaged category. Now, the result now is that we are not regarded as a previously disadvantaged university by government. It means now the funding, we don't get the same funding as Fort Hare, because Fort Hare is historically disadvantaged. Now, we are classified as advantaged. So that is the price we pay for that excellence. But we don't need to stop that excellence. So we want to get into global. So I would like to see our teams actually playing on international stages as UWC.
Yeah.
Our big plan currently, because there is what is called Federation of African University Sports, where universities competing in African competition and they get selected for Universities World Cup. That is our next plan now with women's football. Next year we must go and play in that competition so that we can go to the World Cup in 2025. So we want to play in that stage as the university sport, not just as university, but even as a sport. We must see our teams going to play in France, going to play in the UK. And because when we get into that, it's not only about sporting performance, it also, traveling opens one's mind. So it will be another way of actually educating our players to know that what is in South Africa is not only what they see, there's more outside there.
And if I'm then to expand that question and then ask you, as a person who has been involved in USA Sports, which is the University
Sports South Africa.
Yeah, University
Sports
South Africa. Yeah. How do you see the role of university sports in general then growing and fitting into the greater scheme of the South African sports landscape?
University sports is the next layer after school sport. So there is that continuum. It must be school sport, university sports, and then the national teams. So university sports plays a critical role in that when that athlete comes out of schooling, universities has got better infrastructure than schools and than national federations. So we need to play that role of exposing that athlete to all the dynamics of high performance sport, be it sports psychology, be it nutrition, be it physiotherapy. We bring that holistic development so that when they get to the national federation, they are complete athletes. That is why if you look at rugby now, the Springboks, you can count how many University Cup graduates are currently playing. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
And then that is why we are not surprised with that performance. But you compare that with Bafana that doesn't have links with university sports. I'm sure when you count graduates in the Bafana team, you will not finish this hand.
Yeah.
And that shows in the performance because they did not get that foundation, the university foundation that actually trains your brain and also your physiology on how to, and also expose you to all the technologies that are required in sport. Now they get a matric kid from township, you put them in the PSL, and when they crash, you wonder why. It's because they missed this step of university sport.
And if I'm to then pick your brain on how do we then bridge the gap, because we are establishing that university sports is critical to develop our professional players. How do we then bridge the gap from the previously disadvantaged universities and essentially the universities that were the previously advantaged universities? How do we bridge that gap to ensure that the development that the players are getting at your Tuks University is almost equivalent to what I would then get if I go to the University of Fort Hare?
Actually, what we need to do, the approach must not be to close the gap, but the approach must be to first to say, let us identify universities that have got similar approach to sport. Because if we want to close the gap, it's going to be unfair to expect a Rhodes University that is mass participation based to be like a UWC that is like performance based. So we need to say, okay, which universities are high performance based? And then, okay, it's these 5. What are your areas of focus? Then if we say, okay, these 3 universities are strong in swimming, then let us then design a uniform high performance system for swimming so that those universities follow the same protocols, so that someone who trains at UWC gets the same training as someone who trains in Pretoria. We do that in different codes. Basically, we are establishing the areas of excellence across the country so that those that have something in common, they collaborate, working within the same structure and system. Then we will get to a system where we address your question of how do we make sure that someone who's in Cape Town gets the same training as someone who's in Pretoria. It will be informed by each university's approach to sport.
And what stakeholders do we then need to bring to the table to start having those conversations?
We need to bring universities themselves, we bring the national federations, and we bring SASCO. Because those are the three players. Once we have identified those centers, then we go as a unified structure to the government of the Department of Sport and say, okay, these are the centers of excellence in South Africa. How do you then come and play a supporting role within this? And the plan then must be to say, when we give mandates, to say, okay, swimming institutions, make sure that by the next Olympics, you have produced at least so many athletes that will be in Olympics. Football, you do the same. Hockey, you do the same. Then there will be one uniform structure now that will fit into our Olympic system.
And the uniform structure, does it not then kill the competition amongst universities? Because we do have our varsity sports competitions, our USA competitions that do happen. Does that uniform structure not say that the same three universities are always going to win rugby or they're always going to win soccer?
No, not really. Not really, it won't. Because remember, that system, there is already a talent identification protocol in South Africa. It's there, it was approved by SASCO and all federations. So if we follow that, which is already in place, we're not killing the system. Let me make an example. Our rugby collaborate with Stellenbosch Rugby for training. But it doesn't mean one is going to be disadvantaged. UWC women's football, we collaborate with UJ, but we go and play with UJ and beat them. So it's not really going to kill the sport. Actually, it will make the sport stronger, and it will also allow for easy movement of coaches. Because currently, for that coaches, it's hard to move because they are used to that one system. But now, if they know that this training, which I'm currently implementing in Pretoria, is the same as the one in Cape Town, it creates an easy exchange of athletes as well as coaches.
So, the role of university sports, we are establishing that it's absolutely paramount to the success of our national teams. And it's evident in the performance of the sporting codes that have made it a point to adopt and accept the role of university sports.
100%.
If I'm then to ask you to now come back and reflect on your personal journey. Your personal journey from the time usaqala udlala ibhola, and you look at the entire journey, the journey in its entirety till today. You know, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you have learned over this time?
Sure, it's been a roller coaster of a journey. It's never been easy. I think from where I started with nothing to lose, just enjoying, to where it got competitive. But I think the biggest lessons for me, one is appreciating the people that you work with, and also knowing when to compete and when to collaborate, and also being open to ideas. Those have been a big lessons. But one of the lessons that then personally affected me mostly, I would say, it's the family structure, the importance of the family structure as your anchor. Because the danger with sport is that it gets so addictive and you get so competitive and you want to win at all times. And that drive to win at all times, it may affect one negatively in that you end up chasing things for the sake of chasing things because you want to prove that you can still win. And sport also takes you away from family. If one doesn't manage his time and his travels well, you may end up losing that touch with your family, and then it becomes very bad when you get home and feel like a stranger sometimes because you've not been with family for long. You've actually missed your child's milestones because you were not there when your child started to walk. You were somewhere in Europe. So that's the downside. And also, one mistake, and that tends to befall people in sport, which I've also been a victim of, that if you look at sport administrators, you find that most of them are either single or divorced because of the time that they spend away from families, where you end up feeling like a stranger to your own partner because you are away. And also when your partner raises those things, because of your competitive nature, you don't want to listen. You become a sports person instead of being a family man. I know I've been a victim of that because there was a time when I almost lost my family because I found myself having more time and more comfortable time and friends in sport than in family. And now there was that big divide between Mandla sport administrator and Mandla husband and the father. And that affected my family. Yes, I didn't divorce. No, I'm still going strong with my family. But it almost destroyed my family. I think I was very close to getting a divorce. And that was not because of my wife, it was because of my doing. Because the more time you spend away from your family, you will end up getting irritated when you get home because you can't wait for the next match, you can't wait for the next adventure. And those adventures, unfortunately, especially for men, they bring girlfriends. So I know there was a time when I cheated on my wife with someone in sport. I cheated, and yes, it came out, and I had to come clean, and yes, it affected my family. And that was one of the lessons I learned, that one actually needs to separate sporting time and family time. And out of all that, one decision I made about my own development was that I will never take work home. I never do that. When I'm home, I'm home. My kids know. I will never get home and say, no, I still need to finish this. And no. I leave work at office. And the reason I do that is I understand that family will always be there for me. The employer will not always be there for me.
Right.
And when you pass on, the first thing your boss is going to do is to call HR and say, can you advertise? You'll be the next person here. So that is what all those experiences, they put me where I am today, to know the value of family in relation to sport, and also defining those clear boundaries between your family time and your sporting time. That's why at home I watch less sport on TV. I watch less sport because it's my family time. I must watch what my family enjoys. Sport, I do lots of sport every day, so when I'm in family, I must be with family.
No, that's true. And I really appreciate you opening up about your journey in its entirety, and especially your perspectives on the industry. And I don't want to step out of this interview not having asked you, because remember I said we're going to put a question in the parking garage, and I'm going to bring it out and actually ask you, what are your future aspirations as an individual involved in sports administration?
When I step out of sports, because one thing for sure, I don't think I will die doing sport. A time will come when I say sport, tell you it's been good. And I want to venture into law when I leave sport. Hence, my labor law masters currently. I'm already preparing myself for the future because that is where I see myself. So I will go into labor law field after sport, and that is my plan.
Thank you firstly for sharing in its entirety your journey and even your aspirations. And if I'm then to ask you, you know, what is that greatest piece of advice that you have ever received from, it can be from anyone, even it does not have to be sports related, but what's that greatest piece of advice that you've received and that has greatly impacted your life and that you would like to impart to the next person?
I think the first part will be do what makes you sleep better at night. And if you sleep better at night, it means you have made a good decision. And secondly, life is not about you. And life doesn't owe you a favor. You need to work for what you want, and you need to fight for what you want. Nothing's going to come to you in a silver platter.
Thank you very much. And with that advice, how has it helped you?
Geez, it has really helped me. I think in that I'm able to reflect before I take a decision, because I learned that if you take decisions on emotions, you will not sleep at night. Your conscience will eat you all night. And if you don't sleep at night, you must know you made the wrong decision. Because if it was the right decision, you'd get home and sleep at night. So it has helped me to learn to reflect before taking a decision. And also it has helped me to take my feelings away from the issues. When I have an argument with you, I must not argue based on my emotions. I must target the facts, and also I must know that whatever I say, I do not attack you personally. I attack what you say. Hence, I say life is not about you. But the mistake people do, as soon as I say what you say is wrong, you go around and say, Mandla says I'm wrong. Now we make life about you, but it's not about you, it's about what you do and what you say.
And you know, as a person that's now in management, and I'm going to say you are a leader of the sporting industry, you are a leader in the industry, how important is that statement of removing emotions from making decisions and the decision-making process?
It's very important. I think as humans, naturally, we are emotional beings. We are. But when you get emotional, pause. Pause so that whatever you do, you know that it is not pushed by your selfish interests or your emotions. It is pushed by what is being presented to you. And that has helped me because, you know, sometimes I found myself in spaces where people speak about me, but they don't even know me. And they will say things to me about me, and they don't even know that they're saying things to me. And that is because of how I have conducted myself. I would have people coming to meetings and saying, yo, there is this Mandla, yo, he's so strict, yo, you must watch what you say, he's gonna call you off. And they don't know they're saying it to me. And when someone comes now and say, hey, Mr. Gagayi, they get a shock. And they will even come and say, but why did you not react? And why must I react? Because you're not insulting me. So it's good that you dissociate your emotions. Yes, you will be emotional, but take pause and then come back with a clear view. And when you have a clear view, people will trust what you say and what you do because they can see it's genuine. Unlike coming with your emotions and forcing people to support what they know it's not right, but because you're emotional about it, you end up ruling by fear instead of ruling by principle.
And as a part of the show, we've got this tradition where we get you as the guest to ask a question or to write it down for the next guest that we'll have on the show without knowing who that guest will be. And from our previous guest, this is the question that they had for you. If you were not involved at all with sports, what do you think you would be doing?
I would be a lawyer, definitely.
And what type of law would you practice?
I would definitely be in labor law. I'm sure by now I'll be at labor court representing someone.
And why law?
I think for me, law offers you opportunity to really get to know people better and also get to appreciate and understand the burdens that people carry with them.
Mr. Gagayi, thank you very much for taking the time, firstly, to share your story with us. There are a lot of lessons that I have personally learned as a young person, trying to establish themselves. But I'm pretty sure that people listening, people watching, will also take quite a lot of beautiful stories and gems from what you have said and actually go on to implement them in their different spheres of life. And essentially, you being here really does mean a lot to us, and I hope that the lessons that you have personally learned and you have shared with us on this podcast today will go on to make a difference not only in people's lives but essentially on the sports industry, and we get to see our industry progress, especially in South Africa, into a business as you have so passionately shared that is what you would like it to move into. Thank you very much, and we wish you all of the best. And hopefully, in the near future, we will see you fulfill your dream of becoming a lawyer.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.